Oh, I thought, I hear that now? I guess not. Nope.
How are you doing, Kim?
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing okay. Faith Anna's back there.
Oh, I thought, I hear that now? I guess not.
He's ready to take a picture.
Yeah, so as soon as Thor gets here too. How are you doing, Kim?
That sounds good.
I believe those are unlocked.
Thank you. Sure, yeah, I'll try to make sure you can get in over there.
We're doing good. Yeah, the kids seem to have recovered pretty well, so we're keeping them so busy too. There's not a lot of downtime, so that helps. And then we're getting a new kitten in June.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Yep, a kitten in June to replace our Squiggy.
Oh, not replace.
Yeah,
To rekindle.
that's right. That's right. Absolutely.
Mary, this is Faith Ann. She does a lot of our
Working on my Asian American Pacific Islander.
When is that?
That's next May.
Next May.
Hi, Belle. I love Belle.
He's like,
Yes, she told me to.
I found a picture. Abby.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, just stopping over. Miss Erin's like, "Hey, no one's not here. Anybody come?" I was like, "I can make that work."
We're happy to see you.
Yeah. Even though I'm learning myself how to do that. They're pretty much it. And that TV. But I was like, how the heck did you guys do this? Yeah, the third camera. Oh yeah, just the
How have you been for? Good, so. Good.
Wild, rapid fire.
Yep.
And are you ready? No, I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, beautiful crumpet. Okay, so this is my loan to me?
This is on loan to you.
Okay. I don't have to do the whole thing?
I think it has the whole. Should have. Never mind. Doesn't matter.
I haven't been able to change my
Yeah.
password. I still have to change me, but that's been working. Is that it? I have it written down as
H-E-M-E,
yeah.
capital A-S-A-P, pound sign.
I wrote it down. It's this, here it is.
No, it just wasn't.
Oh,
You gotta click up there.
okay. They worked on this computer, but I have to get onto the network. Let's see if I can get on this one. Yeah, I'm having trouble logging on, sorry. Okay, sure, thank you.
We'll hold.
Here, did it work? What's that here? Guess I should have gotten here earlier. Where's my phone? I'm sorry, I should have gotten here earlier. Did I leave my phone over there? Did I put my phone down? Well, it's in with it.
It's kind of, your phone is in
Did I leave it over there? Yeah, I walked in with my phone because it's asking me for my verification. And so, I know I had it on the way in.
Thor took it and he was going to start taking selfies of himself.
Not over there. That's weird. Maybe I can get far with
Is that her, Jack?
It's an iPhone 11. I probably left it on here when I walked back there, but nobody saw it. Yeah, try calling it. Oh, here, I got it. Just have to say Anthony once. Okay. I think I'm going to be okay now. Thank you so much. Thank you. I think we're good. Yeah.
All right, good evening and welcome to tonight's board meeting. Roll call will show that all 5 board members are present, as well as our 2 student representatives who are joining us remotely. Has this meeting been posted, Ms. Midzik?
Yes, it has.
All right, at this time I invite you to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good evening, everyone. At this time, Ms. Midzik, is there communication that you'd like to report out?
Yes, there is. Results of the April 6th spring election for school board determined that Mary Lowell Grogan was elected to the board and incumbent Joseph Corpetto was reelected. Both members will serve a regular 3-year term and will take their oath of office at tonight's board meeting. In compliance with Board Policy 162, new board member Mary Grogan began her orientation by meeting with district office administrators last week. Actually, it was 2 weeks ago. Individual board member meetings have begun and are ongoing. When the board conducted their self-evaluation, making improvements to the orientation process was a priority. Responsive to this feedback, I've been working with Mary Ann Jacobson to make sure all meetings are scheduled and focused on the topics outlined in policy. The board will also hold its annual board reorganization at the meeting tonight. Officers will be elected by the board from its members to serve a 1-year term as president, vice president, clerk, or treasurer. They will assume the duties of their office immediately. The board will also discuss and appoint members to the board committees for a 1-year term. The sophomore class received information on the application process for the student board member position for the 2-year term, 2021 through 2023. Interviews will be conducted in May with the principal, superintendent, board president, and the outgoing student board member. The district is working with the Greendale Health Department to offer a clinic for students age 16 and over on site on Thursday, April 29th. Parents have been notified of the opportunity to schedule an appointment and must accompany their 16 and 17-year-olds to the clinic. Hyatt Pharmacy will be on site to provide the Pfizer vaccine to those interested. The second dose will be administered on site on May 25th. Greendale School's sustainability team invited visitors to celebrate Earth Day on Thursday, April 22nd with special outdoor activities in the high school garden. Activities included a garden tour, learning about composting, a seed and plant exchange, and nature-focused craft activities. Community listening sessions as part of the strategic planning process concluded on April 14th. Thank you to the community members who participated. This weekend, April 30th and May 1st, are the first work team meetings. In these meetings, a group of 20 to 30 community members will review the reflections from the listening sessions, discuss the common themes, and determine broad goals for the district over the next 3 to 5 years. Following their work, the district will develop and create a community survey to gain additional feedback on the draft plan from stakeholders. More information on accessing the survey will be shared in the coming weeks on the district website and through a postcard sent to all residents in the month of May. School will not be in session on Friday, April 30th due to Staff Professional Development Day. Greendale High School is holding a prom for junior and senior students on Friday, May 21st. The school will host the traditional Grand March for participating students to model their prom attire beginning at 5 p.m. There will be no live audience for the Grand March. Families and community members are invited to watch the event's live stream on the district's YouTube channel. Graduation will be held at Gavinsky Stadium on Saturday, June 12th, beginning at 11 a.m. All graduates will have the opportunity to cross the stage to receive their diploma and for a photo during the celebration. Other details are being determined at this time and will be communicated. Planning is underway for the 8th grade farewell assembly to take place on Monday, June 7th at 5:30 p.m. It will be planned as an outdoor event held at Greendale High School and Gavinsky Stadium. To create a safe environment for all, the event will be for the students and their parents or guardians only. Details of the ceremony are being developed and will be provided soon. Summer school planning has begun. We will be holding in-person learning following safety protocols in place for the school year. An option for virtual learning opportunities is being considered and will be shared with families as more information is available. Students entering grades K through 8 will have classes beginning on Monday, June 21st and continuing through Friday, July 23rd. Classes for students entering K through 3rd grade will be held at Canterbury, and students in grades 4 through 8 will attend Greendale Middle School. Classes for 9th through 12th grade will be scheduled at the high school. All students will be off the week of July 5th. Registration is scheduled for May 10th through the 21st. The course selection guide for high school students is available on the website. On April 6th, students in 8th grade took advantage of the nice weather in their outdoor classroom. Students are learning how genetic traits are passed from one generation to the next. 5K and 1st grade learners at Highland View have begun exploring writing craft during Writer's Workshop. They have been reading Moe's pigeon stories, studying his creative techniques, speech bubbles, fun punctuation, movement lines, character facial expressions, etc., and then using what they've seen to inspire their own pigeon books. 1st graders at College Parks learned about and wrote stories of how to help take care of our earth in early April. 3rd grade students at Canterbury School have been learning about how geographical location impacts the way in which people live. As part of their learning, students researched various landforms and created a 3D model of land area. To tie everything together, students are pretending they live in that land area and are writing a friendly letter that shares information about what their life would be like. The district received the following donation: $500 from Steuben County Community Foundation in Angola, Indiana, on behalf of Eric Stobauer and Haley Joe Geiger Family Enrichment Fund to College Park Elementary School. And that concludes my communications.
All right, thank you, Kim. Any comments from visitors this evening? So if you'd like to speak, I welcome you to those who will be speaking this evening, and would like to remind you that the school board meetings are for the purpose of carrying on the business of the district, and they are the official business meetings held in public. Through School Board Policy 186, the board allows citizens to comment by scheduling 2 opportunities on the agenda to receive citizen comments. In accordance with the intent of open meeting laws, please be aware that although the Board of Education welcomes these comments from the public, it cannot discuss or debate items brought up during public comments. In order to hear from all citizens who wish to speak and to ensure that the official business of the district is addressed, board policy sets a time limit for citizen comments. And we'll be adhering to those policies and its time limits at tonight's meeting. Persons wishing to address the board are asked to come to the podium and state their name and address for the record. Comments are limited to one time, and individuals will be speaking will be limited to 3 minutes. Thank you. Welcome.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Laura Miller, 5234 Lakeside Drive. Good evening. I am speaking on behalf of PAGE, People Advocating for Greendale Equity. We would like to talk to you about a new policy that will be introduced to you tonight called Policy 410, Student Equity and Anti-Racism. This is very well done, and we are happy that so many people in our school community worked on it. Many excellent ideas were incorporated, but we believe one crucial idea is still not explicitly stated and should be among, if not first, of the section titled Equity Non-Negotiables. This is the idea that eliminating implicit bias and inequities begins with each of us as individuals. We believe that this is a very key equity non-negotiable that needs to be included. Also, it is our hope that the WASB will make a section in their policy numbering system to include a section for equity and anti-racism. Also, in the opening paragraph, we would like to see the idea that the board and administration is willing to make timely changes when needed to meet the goals of this new policy. Also, in the second to last paragraph, under the heading Anti-Racism Practices, parents and or guardians should be included in this idea. This would be in addition to student, staff, educational programs, etc. Finally, we hope that a rule will be included to support this new policy that will outline the specifics of how these goals and practices will be achieved. For example, curriculum changes, ongoing trainings, and timely communication updates. We would like to thank everyone for their hard work that has been put into this new policy, which will help make Greendale schools even better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening. Joe Russ, 16800 West Shadow Drive, New Berlin, representing 5599 Basswood Street. First of all, congratulations to you, Joe Capito, on your election, and congratulations to Mary Grogan on being elected to the school board and even getting more votes than Joe Capito. Seems this little white postcard some residents received did some good as it brought other issues to my attention. And Mrs. Capito is working and has been working in various teaching capacities in the Greendale schools. This is interesting because looking back as far as 2014 in school board minutes that pertain to teacher compensation models and agreements with the Greendale Education Association, the votes have been unanimous. That means you, Mr. Capito, have been voting on contracts that benefit a family member. That is an ethics violation. You should have been recusing yourself. While I have an open records request pending regarding Mr. Capito's employment history, I'm also filing a complaint with the Wisconsin Association of School Boards regarding this apparent conflict of interest matter. I would hope the current school board selects a new president, as it seems Mr. Capito's lack of P-card oversight, letting Dr. Kiltz walk after nearly $10,000 in personal use, his recent election loss, and now this, shows it's time Greendale wants to change. Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, we do not discuss and debate comments brought up, but we are allowed to clarify incorrect and inaccurate statements. My wife is not a teacher within the Greendale School District. She is not covered by the Greendale Education Association's contract. Any other questions or comments tonight? Good evening, Mr. Sabrowski.
Good evening. Jason Sabrowski, 6030 Doyle Street. First of all, congratulations, Joe and Mary, on your win. I know you guys will do a great job for our community. Appreciate that.
If we can keep the comments quiet, we're trying to respect the speaker tonight, Mr. Russ. Thank you.
One of the comments I was talking to, sorry.
I'm sorry.
For next year, and it might already be happening, but something I would like to ask is to hopefully get Canterbury back up to 5 days next year instead of the 4. Such as something I'm asking that you guys would work on. I think it's very important that the kids get the full 5 days and not the 4 days. So that's something I'd like to ask. So my daughter's birthday was on Friday, this past Friday. So it's just a quick little story for you guys. But it really made me think about things and want to bring it to your attention. I'm sure you guys know this already, but I just thought I would share it with you. But I took her to lunch, and I dropped her back off at Canterbury, and I walked her in. And Heather, one of the officers, happened to be in the foyer there, or lobby. And Juliet right away, "Hi, officer, how are you doing today?" And I was like, that's really cool. And it was really cool, too, having 4 daughters, that she got to see a woman police officer, because I don't think there's many out there. I know Greendale has 2-ish, maybe 3. But I think that was really cool. So later on at night, I said, what did you think about having a police officer in school? And she's like, it's really cool. And she's like, and she's really pretty, too. And so that's how Juliet is, though. And so it was really neat. And she's like, she once in a while comes into the classrooms, and she gets to see the police officers. So that was really cool. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. So as a parent, knowing that we have our SROs in the schools makes me really feel safe, knowing that my kids are protected. And I know that the officers aren't in every school at every time, but I know that they're floating and bouncing around, and that really gives me, and I feel a lot of other parents, that security blanket. I haven't ever met Heather before. That's the first time. So like I said, it was neat to see that she was a woman police officer. Jeremy, I have met him a few times. That guy is outstanding. Having him in the schools for the kids as a role model, I think, is a really awesome thing. I wish that when I was in high school, had a police officer I could look up to. I think it would help me with, and I've always been very respectful, but with showing respect and just knowing when you see a police officer, it's not always bad things. It can be good stuff, or even just being able to talk to them in a good manner. I think that is really neat. So that's it. I guess I just want to say thank you for you guys having the SROs, and especially in these crazy times. I feel like there's been shootings all the time lately. Every couple of days you turn on the news and there's more shootings. So just knowing that they're there, it makes me feel safe for my kids, and also safe that the teachers are safe too, because I've grown to have relationships with the teachers. We have a lot of awesome teachers in Greendale. So thank you guys for everything. I'm going to stay for a little bit, but not too long, because I do have to go to her birthday party with her friends tonight. So thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming out this evening, and please share your compliments to Police Chief Rosenau, too.
I can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeing any additional comments, please.
Hi, Mark Yanish, 5595 Oakwood Circle. Just wanted to say congratulations to Joe and Mary for your recent election victories. Joe, you've been involved with these schools for a couple of decades now. I first met you when our kids were together over at College Park, and you were involved with the PTO, Scouts, various committees within the district before you even got on the board. You and your family have given so much to this district. I'm just pleased that you are continuing. You led the district through one of the most challenging no-win years that our schools will ever face. And you did so more effectively than just about any other district in the area. I'm glad you're continuing to let our schools benefit from your experience and leadership. Thank you. Mary, congratulations on your first trip on the board. Now that the campaigns are over, it's time to do the hard work. To make sure that you have complete, accurate information and a full understanding is the biggest challenge that this board faces. And the decisions that have to be made are big and important to all of us that live here. I'm confident that you will do well. I'm hoping that you do very well for this district in helping us stay the course that we're on right now. Again, congratulations to both of you, and best of luck.
Thank you. All right, any other comments from visitors this evening? All right, seeing no additional comments, we will continue with the agenda. The first thing that we'll do is we'll take our oath of office. So both Mary and I, newly elected, will share tonight's oath of office. So you can stay at your seat and just read your oath of office.
Okay. Do I need to raise my right hand? I, Mary Laurel Grogan, swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of the office of Greendale School Member to the best of my ability. So help me God.
Congratulations. I, Joseph Crepitto, swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of the office of Greendale School Board Member to the best of my abilities. So help me God. So congratulations, Mary.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Congratulations to you both. And with the next item on the agenda, I will take over the meeting, I believe. The state of Wisconsin requires the Board of Education of districts like Greendale to reorganize and elect officers of the board. This must take place on or after the fourth Monday in April and within a set time limit of 30 days. The process of determining the president for the upcoming year is now called to order. Is there a nomination for president?
I nominate Joe Crepitto for president.
Second. I nominate Kathy Weed Vincent for president.
Is there a second to the nomination of Kathy Weed Vincent for president of the Greendale Board of Education? Seeing none, are there any other nominations?
I nominate Thor Misko for president.
Is there a second to the nomination of Thor Misko for president of the Greendale Board of Education?
I nominate Noel Yarnish for president.
Is there a second to the nomination of Noel Jorzianish for president of the Greendale Board of Education? Seeing none, we have nominations are closed. We have a nomination for board president, and I will call for a roll call vote. Mary?
No.
Noel?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Thor?
Yes.
And Joe?
And I'm yes.
Joe Crepitto has been elected as president of the Greendale Board of Education effective April 26, 2021. And I turn the meeting over to the president.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you to the board for your confidence in me. I look forward to serving with everyone, and I'm proud to serve with this team. So congratulations to everyone, and I look forward to serving with you. Okay. So at this time, is there a nomination for vice president?
I nominate Thor Misko for vice president.
Is there a second to the nomination of Thor Misko for vice president of the Greendale Board of Education?
I second.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? And for a third time, I'll ask, are there any other nominations? All right, at this time, nominations are closed, and we will proceed with a roll call vote, starting with Mary.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And I am yes. Congratulations, Thor.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll continue with the board officers, and I call for a nomination for board secretary.
I nominate Kathy Weed Vincent for board secretary.
Second.
There's a nomination as second for Kathy Weed Vincent for board secretary of the Greendale Board of Education. At this time, are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? And for a third time, I ask, are there any other nominations? Seeing none, nominations are closed, and I'll call for a roll call vote for Kathy Weed Vincent for the role of the office of secretary. Mary?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And I am yes. Motion carries. Continuing on, is there a nomination for board treasurer?
I nominate Noel Jors Yanish.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to nominate Noel Georgianish for board treasurer. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? And for a third time, I ask, are there any other nominations? Hearing none, nominations are closed. I'm looking to proceed with a roll call vote for Noel Georgianish for board treasurer.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And I am yes. Congratulations. So that takes care of our election of officers. The next item on the agenda item 1.3, approval of depositories of district funds. So this is an annual approval that we go through, and where we approve the accounts, bank accounts that we will be holding district funds at this year. So Mr. Mitchell, you have a board report in there kind of speaking to where we have our different depository funds. Anything else that you'd like to add or any questions that people have?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say I appreciate the notice of the RFP coming in the fall to really think about consolidating some of them or at least looking at different banking options. So thank you for that.
Yep. Thank you.
I have one question.
Please.
Just wondering if Jonathan could, just for the sake of explanation, are there any changes are these the same depositories that have always been in place it's just a routine approval, or have there been some changes?
There have been no changes for this year.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I think there were some changes made last year or 2 years ago. Is that correct, Jonathan?
That would be correct. Within the last 2 years, there would have been. We would have added the Wisconsin Investment Series Cooperative, as that assisted us with the investments around the referendum debt financing. And so when we issued those bonds, where those dollars went, so that could be tracked specifically related to the requirements of the bond proceeds spend down. And so that would have been the last change to these depositories. The note that you have at the bottom of the notice is a conversation that we've had regarding looking at having 5 different depositories, looking at the efficiency of that. We have really good local partners, and so we respect those relationships, but looking at the efficiencies of managing those 5 different entities and working through an RFP process to see if there's a more efficient way that we can utilize those depositories. Any changes before they would be implemented would come in front of the board, but this specifically comes to the board during the reorganization meeting each year as part of practice.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think the last one before that was the Tri-City move for Park and Rec from U.S. Bank was, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And that wasn't this year, but just as a...
That was maybe 2-3 years ago, or do you remember when the Park and Rec moved, or we moved to Tri-City National Bank?
I don't remember, and Jonathan
Oh, it was-
wouldn't have that in his
Prior to-
ranks.
It precedes me, but yeah, I understand that there was an account that was opened near term at Tri-City. Yep.
All right, so any other questions? Otherwise, this is a standard approval that happens every year as part of the reorganization, just to approve the deposits for our account.
And it is legally required that the board approve the depositories.
So any other questions? Otherwise, I'm looking for a motion to approve depositories of district funds.
I motion to approve the depositories of district funds, agenda item 1.3.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second to approve depository of district funds. Any further discussion? Then I call for a roll call vote, starting Mary.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm yes, motion carries. Then the next item on our agenda regarding the reorganization of the board, and Ms. Midzik mentioned it earlier, is the committee assignments. So you'll see a number of committees that the board has throughout the year, and you'll see in the agenda, or attached to the agenda, who served in this year's, who served in these roles this current year. So we are looking to update it for the upcoming school year. I'm sorry, not the upcoming school year, but effective going forward today for the 21-22 year.
And I did survey the board, and I have a list of people with high levels of interest in each of the committees that may help to expedite the conversation around committee assignments. And so if you'd like, I can go committee by committee and share who has the highest level of interest among the board.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be
Okay.
great.
The CISA 1 delegate, the highest level of interest was Thor Misko, and no one else had an equivalent level of interest.
Thanks, guys.
And I think that responsibility is kind of a one, I don't want to say one time, but it's an annual commitment, and it is a one-time responsibility. And I think, Kathy, were you part of it last year? Did you?
My first year I was.
Okay.
And it was like one time.
One meeting.
All right, so we will have Thor fill that committee?
Yeah, and I can go through the rest, and
Okay,
then you can
before
come
we-
back, because it might be that if one person has the highest level of interest in 5 committees, you might not want to put them on 5 committees. So the WASB delegate, Kathy, had the highest level of interest. The Park and Rec committee, Noel, had the highest level of interest. For Village Board Liaison, Joe, Mary, Thor, and Kathy all had equally highest level of interest in that position. The Greendale Education Foundation, Noel and Joe had equally high levels of interest in that. The Policy Committee, Mary, Noel, and Kathy had high levels of interest in that. Time for Learning, Thor was the highest level of interest. And the Legislative Advocate and SWASA, Kathy, had the highest level of interest. So in CISA delegate, WASB delegate, Park and Rec committee, Time for Learning, and Legislative Advocate and SWASA, you only had one person who had the highest level of interest. And then for Village Board Liaison, Greendale Education Foundation, and Policy Committee, there were more people with equivalent levels of high interest than opportunities available to serve. So that can be a point of discussion.
So with that one, we do currently have 2 liaisons, correct, to the board?
Correct.
So is that what we're looking to continue?
Well, and you may want to discuss the role of the village board liaison, because I'm not sure that that you may want to do it differently than you have in the past. In the past, the village board liaison has met with the village president a couple of times during the year, maybe once a quarter. And you may have an interest in having the village board liaison attend a monthly meeting of the village board and report back on the business of the village board, which hasn't been happening as regularly. And so if you want to adjust that, then you may want to discuss who would be village board liaison and attend the village board meeting at least once, one of the 2 days per month, and then report back to this board in the committee updates. So that might be something that you're interested in modifying, and then you can have a discussion about who would have the ability to attend on a regular basis.
I'll add, I have actually been attending meetings on a fairly regular basis, and Tuesday nights do work for me. So I'd be interested in filling one of those.
I'd like to add, too, that I think Joe and Thor were village board liaisons for this last year, so maybe it would be time to give them a break and take 2 new people. It does look like, though, Joe, is your only highest level of interest was the village board, is that correct?
No, he was also highest level for the Education Foundation.
Oh, for education, that's right, okay. So if you know, if this is a friendly negotiation.
And that's exactly what we're looking to do. I mean, we're looking at the conversations to see.
Yeah.
And, I think Kim mentioned earlier, I want to make sure that it's equitable, that everyone has a role. We want to make sure that everyone is responsible for that. So I think what I'd be comfortable with is, as Kim mentioned, I think I think it's important for the school board president, the superintendent, to continue maybe quarterly meetings or bi-monthly meetings with the village board president and the village manager. So I think that's one way that we can continue to have the conversations. And then another way is to actually have more of a village board liaison, where someone from our school board attends the board meetings, and then perhaps they share updates at that time, or they bring back to our school boards updates from the village board meetings. So that's a second opportunity for a village liaison or village board liaison. So I guess that's how I would propose that we use that role going forward.
That sounds agreeable to me. I'm a little concerned because Kathy's so interested in so many, so, what are your top 2, Kathy? I mean, you wouldn't want to.
And that's exactly where. Let's kind of, and I think that's why Kim had said let's talk about all of them, because otherwise, if we go one at a time,
Sure. It might be disproportionately distributed.
Right.
Why don't you consider Mary serving as the liaison, and if you can't make a meeting or 1 month, Kathy can serve as your backup?
Sure, that sounds fine to me.
For the village board, is that?
Right. Well, I was going to say, if we wanted to negotiate between that and policy, that would probably be where another area that we could discuss. So I'd be happy to get back on policy.
Why don't you go there and discuss policy? I think for policy, it's important to me, in my role as an administrator, to make sure that we have at least one board member who continues and one who turns over. And so as I don't want to turn over both policy for someone who hasn't been on policy. I know that Noelle's been on policy for a year. She's had a year in the position, and Kathy has served in the past but has not been on recently.
I just want to say, I had the 1 year, and I kind of got the rhythm of it and the understanding of it, and I'd really like to continue for at least 1 more year to be able to kind of pick up where I left off and have that experience. And it's really the only one I really, really want.
And this is a decision we're making as a board, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't
Correct.
need to.
Correct.
Yep, you get to
Correct.
make that
So
decision.
we are-
I'm sharing my
that's
input.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm assuming that each of us will have, given the amount of members, at least 2. So I put in a plug that I'd love to be on policy with Noelle as well. I do have some prior experience in another district, and I do have 3 degrees in education. So I think that qualifies me for policy, or maybe over-qualifies me. So I don't know, I guess I could arm wrestle Kathy for.
Well, here's what I'll negotiate back with you. How about I be the village liaison and you be the alternate? How would that sound to you?
Sure, I'll take
That
that
work?
deal. I'll raise you.
And as much as I love policy, I'll step aside.
Okay, thank you. That sounds good.
All right, so Thor, we have you as the CISA 1 delegate, Kathy, the WASB delegate, and the village board liaison.
And the legislative advocate.
Yeah, and then, so Thor, I want to be conscious of your commitment. So the CISA 1 delegate is kind of a one-time thing. The time for learning, you're willing to continue on with that?
That'll be a new role for me.
Oh, okay.
Both of these will be new roles for me this time.
Okay. And then, Noelle, would you like to stay with the Education Foundation?
You know what? I'll defer that to you because I'm picked because kind of the highest one for Park and Rec.
Oh, okay, that's right. 'Cause you're doing the
So I'll
Rec.
defer Education
Okay.
Foundation to you.
I will do that. And the only thing is Thor, unless you would like to be part of the Ed Foundation, it's up to you.
Yeah, I served on it this last year, so I'm fine either. Fine either way. I mean, part of me was trying to rotate through the different areas just to make sure that I've been able to circle up
Yep.
and be part of each one of these different components. So I didn't want to.
Okay.
So I'm open. I'm more than happy to continue serving in the Greendale Education Foundation, but I really wanted to swing into CISA, which is something that I haven't been involved in, and then Time for Learning, which I haven't been involved in. So.
Okay, then I will stay with the Education Foundation. Do we know when that board meets?
It meets on Monday nights when the Board of Education does not meet.
Okay.
And I think everyone else, so what I have is CISA 1 delegate. I'm for the record, and Marianne probably has this, but just so Marianne has it clear. CISA 1 delegate, Thor Misko. WASB delegate, Kathy Weed-Vincent. Park and Rec Committee, Noel Georgianish. Village Board Liaison, Kathy Weed-Vincent. Greendale Education Foundation, Joe Crepito. Policy Committee, Mary Grogan and Noel Georgianish. Time for Learning is Thor Misko. And Legislative Advocate and SWASA is Kathy Weed-Vincent. Is that accurate so that you are all in consensus on that and I have it
So
accurately
Joe is
depicted?
also a village liaison, correct?
Correct, but his village liaison will be the portion of meeting with the village president,
Okay.
and then yours will be attending meetings and reporting back.
Okay.
I have one more question, sorry. Is the WASB, is that something that could be job shared as well, Kathy, or since you're doing 3?
Well, the delegate assembly, we have one person that attends that. I usually end up taking a half personal day for that. It's the Wednesday before the WASB conference. So that is a single role.
Okay, it's a one.
It's an annual commitment,
Oh,
right?
A
It's-
one-time
it's-
thing, and you will discuss as a board what is being considered there, and you'll give Kathy direction on how to vote when she attends the meeting.
Okay,
And
thank you.
just to just put out there too, I'm in the process of getting on, I'm next in line to get on the actual policies and resolutions with WASB, so I just thought that would be, kind of a good connect, the two.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And just, I think, Kim, you alluded to this. These are committee assignments that we all participate in. There's a primary liaison, but we all, have time to discuss things and have answer questions. So, for example, the policy committee will meet and go over every nit and nat of the policy, but we as a board will review them at 2 subsequent board meetings. The WASB delegate assembly, we have one representative attend that board meeting or that delegate meeting, but we as a board prior to that meeting discuss how we want that person to vote on the different items. Same thing with the Park and Rec. We have the Park and Rec director present to us as a board. We'll ask questions and provide feedback and comments. So I just want to make sure that everyone's aware and comfortable that we will have one person take the primary lead as that liaison, but overall we still will be very involved and engaged with different components of these committees.
Sure, and can I just clarify too, it's a 1-year position?
Yes.
If for some reason, any board member could step in, it's not that, I can't go to a Park and Rec meeting, right? I mean, if Noelle's not available,
Yeah.
someone else could step in for her. It's
The only
not
thing is that no more than 2 members can be present at the meeting. Otherwise,
Sure,
we'd have
sure.
to post that the board potentially engage in discussion about potential future action, so.
With the WASB delegate assembly, actually, we are posted for that conference, so potentially all of us could be there for that, but
We all go to the convention.
I'll
but
be
I don't-
there.
I don't think we all,
Can go
only one of us represents the district at the delegate assembly.
but they
you
have
can
an
attend.
area in the back that
You
you can
can sit in the back,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I'll be in the background, Kathy.
And there have been times, that the delegate has, asked somebody else to step in if there's a
Sure.
conflict.
As the time gets closer, we look at our calendars and we realize, oh, that Wednesday is bad because this is happening.
Right.
Yep. Okay. Very good questions. Anything else? But I think, Kim, what I heard you note, and I'm actually in the document, I think, were you highlighting them in yellow? So what you highlighted and called out seems to reflect what our conversations are. We are posted to approve these committee assignments. So are there any other comments or questions? Then I'm looking for a motion to approve the committee assignments for the upcoming year as discussed.
I motion to approve the committee assignments as discussed. Item, I'm sorry, my.
1.4.
Yeah, I
1.4.
timed out.
I second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve committee assignments as outlined in agenda item 1.4. Any further discussion? Then I call for a roll call vote,
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
and I am yes, motion carries. That is the reorganization part of our committee meeting. So now we are set for the next year. So very well. All right, so next item on the agenda is the minutes from our last board meeting on April 5th, 2021. So those were part of our packet. Any discussion or questions? Otherwise, I'm looking for a motion to approve the board meeting minutes.
I move approval of the regular meeting minutes of April 5th as outlined in agenda item 2.1.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve the regular meeting minutes of April 5th, 2021. Any further discussion? Then I call for a roll call vote,
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
and I am yes, motion carries. Then next item on the agenda is our financial report, where we do an annual review, or I'm sorry, a monthly review of our checks and disbursements. So Jonathan, anything to add to this month's financial report?
In summary, our revenues were at 60.15% of budgeted revenues as of March 31, 2021. That compared just slightly above last year's 59.86% for the operational fund. And then for expenditures, we were at 54.9% of expenditures, and that compared to 54.28%. I also included in the background document spending to date related to ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 of the federal stimulus funds, specifically for COVID-related expenditures for the school district. And we will continue to add that as part of our monthly financial report, and we'll update the board as it relates to the preliminary budget, which will be in May. The conversations that we're having around allocation of ESSER dollars towards the preliminary budget.
Okay, any questions regarding this month's financial report?
So can you clarify with the ESSER 2 fund? So I see it's spent or encumbered. That means that we're still waiting on some of the allocation?
We have been allocated $1,085,339. Of that, we have spent, cut a check out, or encumbered, meaning we've issued a purchase order and we're currently utilizing. So that's what encumbered would be, 168,000. So it's reflecting that would be 16% of the allocation.
Okay.
That continues on a daily basis. So in the next month, that percentage will be higher as we utilize more of those ESSER 2 dollars.
Think of spent as reconciled in the checkbook and encumbered as you put it out, but you're waiting for it to clear the bank.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
A question about the textbooks. I noticed that the textbooks, we're at, 142% of what we were anticipating last year?
Yeah, I saw that too.
And I'm obviously, I think that was math textbooks that we did this year. So is
Yeah, I'll speak to that because I know the previous year too. So the math textbooks, math tends to be a more expensive purchase than the preceding year, which was music and art. And so there was an increase in allocation and an increase in spending. So the math was purchased. We put some holds on things to be able to spread that out, and as we were talking about the budget, but then there were additional texts that needed to be replaced outside of the math adoption. And so you're seeing an increase, but it's been accounted for within the curriculum budget to even out. So it might be over in that space, but it's going to be under somewhere else.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious if there's anything else that was going on with obviously the little different year than we were anticipating as well.
Yeah.
I have a question about the textbooks. Was there extra expense because each student, you couldn't share textbooks at all with COVID? Everybody had to,
Most of our textbooks
or
are
single use anyhow?
electronic.
Oh.
And so they're user codes, and we have a class set of physical, but by and large, our students are accessing their texts online.
Okay.
All right, good questions. Anything else? Otherwise, I'm looking for a motion to approve checks and disbursements.
I've brought it up before, but I just want to clarify with the overtime. I know we're at 148%, but that is still within budget for those departments, correct? So we're not like over budget in any way with overtime.
Yeah, so overtime would run over 100% because as the snow falls,
Sure.
we continue to call in staff, and we ran into a number of days where that occurred on Saturdays and Sundays and over holiday breaks, where we had large snowfalls and needed to clear the sites to get ready. So that's where you can see a significant variance for the overall budget figure. But in terms of the overall buildings and grounds budget, that would include custodial and maintenance overtime. We are under budget for the department as a whole, yes.
Okay, and I'm assuming that part of that number going up, because it seems a little higher this year, is it also due to COVID-related things that needed to be done, or?
There was overtime that was accumulated at the beginning of the year because we finished a $30+ million construction project and turned over buildings for instruction on September 1. And so there was a very fast turnaround from the time that the construction teams finished to when we needed to have buildings open. And so that was probably the largest one time, meaning you won't see that reoccur in future years, is there was an urgent need to get buildings turned around. And so we did see a larger overtime figure than you would typically see in that late August timeframe, getting buildings ready for the year. When we look at our winter budget as well, that will vary year to year depending on weather and the timing that it happens during the week. And I think we've varied to more weekend and holiday time periods. But the other item was the beginning of the school year. We knew we had to make a commitment in terms of bringing on additional custodial staffing, additional hours, because we had a very strict deadline of when we needed to have the buildings open.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep.
And coming back to the textbooks briefly, the amount that is spent in the textbooks is not 142% of what's budgeted. It's 142% of last year's expenditures. And because art and music were not textbooks, but equipment, if you look up a couple lines at non-capital equipment, that is down to 50% of what we spent last year. It's just where the curriculum purchases were allocated within the funds because of the nature of the curriculum for those. So just to be very clear on that we're not over budget. We're where we're budgeted. It's just a different budget location than last year because of the curriculum being reviewed.
Yeah, it was just one of those things that jumped out at you, and you're something so different from last year. So appreciate the clarification, and just a kudos to Jonathan too in your write-ups. I appreciate the ESSER layouts and keeping us abreast of what's going on in the district updates, and then obviously you did it here as well. And then also the clarification on some of the items that were a little bit different than what we anticipated in the write-up. So thank you.
I'd like to thank Jonathan too, because this is just as far as finances go this year. People don't think about the financial part, but with all the money coming and going and new expenses and last minute things. So thank you for all your hard work. I motion to approve the financial reports, the revenue, the expenditure reports, the checks and disbursements, agenda item 3, 3.1, and 3.2.
Usually the treasurer does that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. If I can, is that okay?
Yo, absolutely. I'll pre-second it.
I move to approve checks and disbursements in the amount of $4,110,025.57.
I second it.
Thank you. There's been a motion and a second to approve checks and disbursements for a total amount of $4,110,025.57. Any further discussion? Then I call for a roll call vote.
Yes.
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 And I am yes. Motion carries. Then continuing on, new business, and The first item on the agenda is personnel, 5.1, where we have some teacher resignations, as well as some part-time teacher contracts for the upcoming school year, as well as notification of teacher layoffs, and an approval of a school counselor appointment for the upcoming school year. So you received a paper copy of that, and it's that time of the year where we have to issue contracts or notify staff of any layoffs. We do have a couple of resignations that are happening for the upcoming school year. And then we are renewing some contracts on a part-time basis. So any questions? Anything, Julie, that you'd like to add?
Just clarification around the 2 layoff notices. That is an adjustment in FTE for part-time teachers that were hired for part-time contracts this year, and the part-time allocation is changing for next year. So there's 2 notifications along those lines.
Were they aware too that?
They are aware.
That's what I figured.
Yep, we've had those conversations with them based on high school enrollments.
Okay.
So can you clarify, were they part-time today, this year?
They were part-time this year, yes.
And they'll be part-time again next year?
One of them is increasing to a full-time position for next year, and the part-time employee is not interested in a full-time opportunity.
Okay.
And the other one is reducing from a part-time position to a less part-time position.
Okay.
We will offer the contract at that part-time, but she has indicated she would like additional FTE before accepting the part-time offer.
I just wanted to make a comment about this agenda item. I read every name for the renewals, and I just wanted to thank the teachers for keeping the students safe and focused on learning during a global pandemic that lasted more than a year. None of the teachers were trained for it, and it's just hats off to them. It's been a really rough year in the classroom. On the front lines, it's been rough. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, so then our agenda, we are posted to approve these contracts for the upcoming school year, as well as a couple of resignations, the reduction to part-time contracts, and the layoff notifications, as well as the teacher or the counselor appointment. So any discussion? Otherwise, I'm looking for a motion to approve outlined in agenda item 5.1.
For clarity and in light of the comments at the beginning of the meeting, it's important to note that Lynn Crepitto's name is not on the list of teacher contracts for approval this evening.
Okay, thank you. Motion to approve personnel action, accept the teacher resignation request, approve the 2021-22 teacher renewals, approve 2021-22 part-time teacher contracts, approve teacher layoff notification, and approve school counselor appointment as outlined in agenda item 5.1.
I second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve personnel, including the teacher resignation request, the 2021-2022 teacher renewals, the 2021-2022 part-time teacher contracts, the approval of teacher layoff notifications, and the approval of the appointment for a school counselor. Any further discussion? And I call for a roll call vote, starting with Mary.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And I am yes, motion carries. Then next item on the agenda is the approval of the teacher compensation model. So this is something that we reviewed at our last board meeting, and it is a salary structure that we have maintained for a number of years, probably about 10 years now, and we've made some tweaks to it over occasionally, as well as this year. So we talked about it last time, but maybe Julie, if you want to kind of provide a quick update as to what we're looking to do this year.
Sure. So the salary structure has been in place since 2013, and we have not made adjustments to the specific cells and levels within the structure as teachers have advanced through the structure. So we are recommending a 2% market increase to the levels of the structure, and teachers eligible to move within the structure. They were frozen for the 2021 school year. We would be looking to advance them to the next level at this adjusted rate for next school year.
And I just wanted to clarify, just for the sake of clarification, that a couple meetings ago, this board approved a retroactive pay compensation but that was for the 2020-21 school year. And now this action item relates to next school year, 21-2022.
That is correct.
21-22.
This is for the 21-22 school year.
Yep. Good clarification.
And as part of that too, we approved, instead of having them go from one cell to the next, which normally would have happened, the raise that was given was less than that amount. And so that's part of the other reason behind this, is that there hasn't been adjustments. You'll see that there's a deletion of A, so there's no longer an A cell. And then there was an addition that was added over time to Q, but we haven't modified the cells in particular. So.
All right, any other questions? I would just like to reiterate, I know we had a resident from New Berlin speak earlier about the teacher salary structure and alluded to the fact that they had heard from someone who had heard that my wife was on the salary structure. That is not correct. She is not a teacher. She is not part of the Greendale Education Association, nor is she on the salary structure. And I just want to confirm that with administration.
That is correct.
So I don't know if any of the board members have any questions
President
about that.
Capito, I appreciate you clarifying that. On the Canterbury website, when you type in Lynn Capito, it comes up as a 5K teacher. So I think either that's where some confusion may have arisen. I don't know if it's a problem with the website or, but I think that's where the confusion came.
Okay.
That would be an individual personnel issue that we would not discuss in open session.
Well, since President Capito brought it up, I thought it was okay.
I was just clarifying, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, if you have questions, you can come to me or you can come to Julie, our Director of HR.
Okay, thank you.
But again, I wanted to just clarify that we did have a resident from New Berlin who asked that question.
I appreciate the clarification, and I think it is important that we are transparent and continue. So I'm glad that you corrected that information in the comments section.
And based on the conflict of interest, I've reviewed that policy, and I will be voting on tonight's salary structure, like I have in the past. All right. Then I'm looking for a motion to approve.
Move approval of agenda item 5.2, which is the approval of the 2021-2022 teacher compensation model.
I second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve the 2021-2022 teacher compensation model. Any further discussion? Then I call for a roll call vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And I am yes, motion carries. Then moving on to new business. So tonight we are hearing a number of policies, and there was some comments during the comments section for the citizens regarding a new policy. But the number of the policies have had revisions, and Noel and Thor, I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to highlight, or Kim, before we get into the new policy regarding student equity and anti-racism.
So we're going to separate that off?
Well, let's talk about the revisions, because the revisions are,
Yep.
let's talk about the revisions, because I think the revisions are more
Right.
editorial or kind of clarification and cleanup.
Sure.
I won't speak for Noel, but I'll speak for Noel and myself. We think the revisions look great.
Yep.
I'll agree with that.
As the outgoing policy committee member, I figured I had to do that at least once.
There was one thing that I got to see which policy it was, that I think there should be a cross-reference to virtual learning like it was.
Homebound instruction?
Yeah, is it homebound instruction?
Yeah, homebound instruction speaks to the possibility of, if an in-school option is not available, we'll consider a virtual option before an in-person approach. And so.
So is there, I think there is a policy that we have that on virtual, isn't there?
We do not have a separate policy on virtual, although I will look that up to make sure that I'm not speaking out of turn. Virtual is mentioned in the school day policy, and so we could look to cross-reference school day if it's applicable. because it may be slightly different. But we'll review that cross-reference for where virtual is identified in the policy. Is there a virtual policy, Kathy, that you're seeing that I missed?
Yeah, there was something I'm just trying to go through because I should have written it down. There was something, virtual programs, I think is what the cross-reference was, but I don't recall which one it was for now. And it's not a big hang-up, but it was just something that I thought should be there, but.
Before the second reading, we'll locate that.
Yeah, I'm not
policy.
seeing it right now, so.
So your comment is making sure that we cross-reference.
Hold on, maybe it's here. Let me just, some of these windows open weird sometimes.
So Kathy, your comment is that we should make sure that we
Here it is.
cross-reference?
Yeah, so homebound instruction guidelines, the rule has file 343.5 virtual programs. So I was just wondering if maybe the homebound instruction policy should also have that. Does that make sense?
We can cross-reference that.
That was the only thing that I,
Just look at that and make sure that it applies to the.
What was the reference? 3.4 what?
343.5.
Yes, we do have a virtual programs policy. Thank you.
I knew we did. See, I read my packet. All right.
Okay, so if we look at homebound instruction guidelines, English language learners,
August.
procedures for instruction, procedures for testing English language learners, and then high school graduation requirements. Again, I don't think there were significant changes. I think it was more just cleanup or maybe an addition or a reference to virtual learning that has taken place these last 2 school years.
And then the rule, are we talking about the rules right now too, or no?
No. The rules are not being brought forward for modification.
Okay, because I just had a question.
Oh,
about-
I see. Yes, we do have them there. We can discuss those.
Okay.
Sorry. I took it out of order. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. So I'm seeing that we deleted 342.61, and I was just wondering the thought behind that, because there was a lot there.
Yep. So the Department of Public Instruction in 2019, sorry, Tim, I'm stepping on your toes. The Department of Public Instruction in 2019 created a handbook.
Okay.
And so for us to have a detailed description of testing that's out of alignment with the handbook would be inappropriate. So what you see in the policy revision is that we reference assessment in alignment with the DPI guidebook.
Okay.
And then we can delete the rule because the procedures
it's
are
already
outlined
there.
accurately by the Department of Public Instruction. And if they make changes, we don't want to have to keep opening our rule.
Yeah, and I was just, because I'm familiar with the levels, and I figured that had to be referenced somewhere, so, okay, thank you.
All right, any questions? Otherwise, we'll bring those back as stated with the one clarification regarding the cross-reference. And then the new policy, the equity and anti-racism policy.
So this policy was the Welcoming Diversity Action Plan identified a number of policies for consideration. And one of the, two of the goals within the policy section refer to a strong anti-racism statement and an adopted list of equity non-negotiables by the Board of Education. In about 1 year ago, Sarah Derrick and Tracy Flater presented on some work that our equity team at the schools and in the district had developed, a list of equity agreements, and presented on that. Citizen comment and policy committee was to use those as the foundation and to go back and bring into a policy format those anti-racism statements that were a goal on the Welcoming Diversity Action Plan. And so over the course of the last year, this has been revisited by the district equity team, by the Welcoming Diversity Action Plan policy team, and by the student equity team in our schools. So it's gone through multiple revisions, multiple discussions with stakeholders around this policy. I will say that WASB does not have a specific policy numbered for anti-racism, and so we looked at some sample districts who had incorporated equity into policy and where that was located within their policy. And 410 was appropriate because it's around student-based policies. We also looked at samples from cities in other states where there is a numbering system that's common among anti-racism and equity policies. So it's gone through quite a few iterations. It's 3 pages, and there's a lot there, and we had citizen comment on some additional ideas that may be within the community. It's basically 3 sections. One is a set of beliefs. The second is a set of anti-racism practices, and the third component is equity non-negotiables. And so it's been vetted for discussion.
One minor item right underneath anti-racism practices on page 1. I think we should change it to say racism is destructive to, instead of the, to our mission, because it begs the question when it's just generic around whose mission, vision.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it might be good just to clarify that we're talking about our
You see that, Kim?
mission, vision, values, beliefs, and goals. And this is one of those items, like you said, Kim, after seeing so many different revisions, I was definitely going cross-eyed trying to make sure that, keeping track of everything that was happening, but I think it came together really well as I read through it again, even, for the 27th or whatever the time it was that we've, gone through this. So I appreciate all the hard work that's gone into really trying to craft this in a way that's meaningful and says something that's important. There's a couple questions, as you mentioned, that came up in comment. One was regarding begins with the individual, and I believe that was adding, the request or the comment was around adding that to the equity non-negotiables. Did I hear that correct? Is that?
I thought she meant it right at the beginning of
That's what I thought.
the policy.
Oh, moving it to the beginning of the policy?
Yeah, that was the way I.
Oh, so begin with, okay. I mean,
And how did she word that again?
I wrote down begins with individuals. So maybe I read that wrong. I thought there was a request to add something around that it's in every individual is a part of this process. But I could have maybe I just missed.
Maybe.
I was under the impression that she said she wanted to add that the individual biases that we have. That's what I heard, but maybe
Okay.
I'm alone on that.
Okay. So maybe that's just a clarification between now and
Yeah.
our next meeting. We can ask to make sure that we understand what was meant by that. The other one was around timely changes, and I believe obviously we have a review process that we do for all of our policies. So, and we're not afraid to update a policy multiple times in 1 year, which I've been part of. So, I do think we don't need to add anything particular there, just because we are pretty diligent about modifying and updating as needed any of our policies.
We might have a policy that talks about how often we review our policies, but you're right. We
do.
do have a
We do have a policy that talks about how often we review our policies. That
Yes.
is correct.
There we go.
So it applies to our entire policy book, and to your point, we do have our policy committee that has been meeting every other month. I think we've got a set schedule, maybe, like I said, 5-6 times a year.
Okay.
Going back to the
Yeah, I was disappointed. So did we not discuss 6.2? Are we first starting with 6.3?
No, we're on 6.1.
Oh, we're still on
I'm sorry, we're still on 6.1,
Oh, okay.
and then we're talking about the new policy.
Sorry.
So if you look at policy 410, equity and anti-racism
Oh, I
policy.
see. Thank you.
That is the new policy.
Yeah, I was just going to ask too. I know there's a lot of confusion, so maybe just whoever feels comfortable. I don't know if Thor or Noel, because they sat on the committee, or if Maggie, but just to explain the difference between equity and equality, because I think there's a lot of confusion around those two words.
Go Maggie.
Yeah, I got it. So equality means the same that you and I both have. If you need glasses, then everyone gets glasses, because then that'd be equal. We all need glasses because you need glasses, so it's equal. Versus equity would say to get access to the material, you need glasses. I don't. So as long as we can all have access to, I like thinking of equity from access, and equality about is like that equal sign. That's as simple as I can break it down.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that.
Equality is the same.
Yep.
Equity is access.
Yep. Access of opportunities.
Are you saying, Mary, that you feel this policy should delineate that?
Oh, no.
okay.
I just know that there is confusion around those two words, and I thought it'd be worthwhile to clarify it just for the public record, since this policy is.
Thank you,
about
because there are intentional word choices. There are times when equity is chosen intentionally and equality is chosen intentionally, so thank you for clarifying the distinction between those words within the policy.
Sure, thank you.
In regards to it starts with the individual. The two paragraphs before the equity non-negotiables, it reads, the attitude and commitment will prevail in all policies and practices concerning staff, students, educational programs and services, and individuals and entities with whom the board does business, essentially saying that this starts with the individual. It may not be sufficient clarity, so we will get clarification.
No, that's helpful, and I think the other part was around the parents and guardians that was brought up, being included, but perhaps they're included in just as that statement says as well, but that could be a way to highlight that.
There were additional comments that you may want to consider or review. I'm not sure if I got them all.
The only one I was wondering about too is where they wanted to add parents and or guardians. And maybe it would be a powerful thing to add them into that paragraph where they talk about the individuals and entities and add families on that.
Because we do talk about families in the first non-negotiable, right? So
yeah, families are throughout, like in the belief statement, and so I don't think that would be out of place in the anti-racism policy as well. I think it'd be a good place to add that.
So how do we want to proceed with this? Would it make sense to reach back out to the organization, or do we have enough that we can?
We'll review the minutes and the recording
Okay.
to clarify that and bring back.
An updated policy.
We'll note the revisions when we bring it back for second reading, so you can discuss.
And make sure that we're clear on what we're going to be approving. Okay.
Right. So we'll bold and highlight and strike through all of the things if there is a change based on comment. If you want us to attempt to incorporate the ideas that were presented in comment, which is really up to you as if you'd like to direct us to do so.
It makes sense to review what the comments were and to incorporate it. Our next board meeting is in a week. We've got a quick turnaround on this. We could always, depending on the feedback and our discussion at the next board meeting, we could always just approve as is and then have those changes come back to the policy committee if they're more substantive than just a clarification of what's already there.
Did Paris have a written question, or did she want to come off mic?
I think coming off mic.
All right.
Yes. Hi.
Good evening, Paris.
So looking at the achieved accomplishments, way at the bottom it says Greenville High School approved and is offering a course in African American and ethnic studies. Based on the meeting that we had about 2 months ago, was there ever any consideration of making it a required course or something that might be implemented and discussed this summer? Or is it still relatively active choice? As well as, do we know who's facilitating that yet and what the curriculum might look like?
Yeah, Paris, we're coming up to that. We haven't gotten to that yet, but at the same time, I can answer that question, which is, it is an elective offering for the 21-22 school year, and there is still discussion and consideration, although we haven't brought it forward to the board, on if there should be some level of requirement. Should it be a specific course, or should it be a specific theme that students would have choices of courses in which to address a theme around histories, and so that's a piece there, and we do not know who's teaching it yet.
Okay, thank you.
There was an approval of a resignation this evening, and that'll impact some of this. So I answered
right.
questions on 6.3, and we'll revisit that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Paris.
All right, anything more about the policy? So it sounds as if we're okay with the revisions to the existing policies. Maggie and Kim, you'll take a look at the new equity and anti-racism policy, determine what comments maybe need to be clarified or incorporated, and then we'll bring those incorporated. We'll highlight those changes at our next board meeting to approve it. If they're substantive, we may...
You can bring it back for a
we
third
can
reading.
bring it for a third reading, or if they're just clarifications of what we believe is already there, we'll approve it for a second reading at our next board meeting.
And then add also the hour as well, in addition to Laura's comments.
Yep,
So.
I have that.
Thank you.
No, I just want to also say I'm really proud of Greendale for the work that's gone into this, and it's not been a small task by any means. I know I've been involved with the policy procedures group that came out of the Welcoming Diversity, and the conversations that have been had through the process have been very important to making Greendale a better place for all students. So I just want to thank everybody who's been a part of that, from the students to the community members to the staff that have all been part of this. It's not that cut and dry, and none of the districts that we looked at had exactly what we were necessarily looking for. And I think that we've done a nice job crafting something that will help make our community and our schools better.
And it's really kudos to Kim and to Maggie for putting this together.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll continue on with the agenda. So next item on the agenda, we're moving along to agenda item 6.2, where we'll be hearing an annual report on the special education report. So Tim, I believe you're going to highlight.
Yep. Thanks, Joe. So tonight I wanted to take the opportunity just to update the board on special education services within the district, provide information related to some district indicators that were kind of tracked upon, and academic achievement data that I can share with you. And then also wanted to just give you guys some updates as to what the department has done in response to COVID and the closure, and how we're providing services and collaborating with our families throughout that process. I think that would be helpful information for you guys to have, and also for the community to hear as well. So that's kind of the structure of the report tonight. The first slide here is just a snapshot for everybody to kind of get a picture of students with disabilities within our district. We currently have 353 students that have IEPs, and I broke down by disability area the areas that students are qualifying. You can see our highest number, which is in most cases, in most districts, falls under that speech category. But then we also have pretty high numbers in specific learning disabilities, autism, and OHI is other health impairment.
Can you explain the acronyms?
Sure, absolutely.
Please, thank you.
So SLD is specific learning disability. EBD is emotional behavioral disability. ID is intellectual disability. OHI is other health impairment. OI is orthopedic impairment. SDD is a significant developmental delay. And that disability area only qualifies students under that label up until the age of 9. So that's kind of the breakdown of those disability areas.
Thank you.
What is the intellectual disability based off of? Because I guess that's a little not familiar with that as much.
So that naming changed a few years back. That was historically known as cognitive disabilities.
Okay.
So a lot of it's based upon IQ, level of functioning, and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Thank you.
All right. So getting into the next number of slides here, the Department of Public Instruction has created a state performance plan to help track district-level compliance in a number of indicators which make up a school district special education profile. I'm sharing with you a few of these indicators and how Greendale is doing in terms of meeting these targets. Not every target that's included within the special education profile is analyzed every year, so I'm presenting on the ones that we have some of our most current information on. The first indicator here is graduation rate, so we're looking at percent of students with disabilities graduating from high school with a regular diploma. And on each of these slides, you'll see what our local percentage is. You'll look at what the state average is, and then you'll look at what DPI has established as the target for districts to attain. And in this case, we're as good as we can be. We were 100% on the year this was measured, so that's fantastic for us in terms of graduation. The next indicator is suspension expulsion, and this is tracking the percentage of students with disabilities suspended and expelled greater than 10 days in the school year. And at the local level, we're at 0%, so that means students with disabilities were not suspended or expelled 10 days or more within a school year. So that's a great achievement for our district as well.
And it's my understanding that you really can't go over that 10, is that right? Or
really, that 10-day marker, if you're approaching that or going over that, it's on the district and the IEP team to reconvene the IEP team to do a manifestation determination to determine if the disability is contributing to the behaviors. And then you can create plans as to how you'll address those behaviors through a functional behavioral assessment or a behavior intervention plan. Correct.
UPI uses a lot of significant figures.
Yes.
Very, very specific numbers.
So our next indicator is transition goals. And what this is marking is that in the state of Wisconsin, students age 14 and older, we have to do what's called a post-secondary education plan. We have to have post-secondary goals. So looking at what students are trying to accomplish after they leave Greendale. Are they going to go to the world of work? Are they going to a 2-year, a 4-year military? What are they doing? And how can we help them through the IEP process attain those individual goals? And this is really just measuring, are we in compliance with that process? And as you can see at the local level, we're 100% compliant in looking at this indicator as well. Now, this next indicator, there's a lot of information on here, but what this slide really speaks to is the inclusive nature of Greendale schools. When we're talking about students with disabilities, we really look at the amount of time that they are provided services in the regular education setting versus a special education kind of pull-out type of setting. And the way that the DPI breaks that down is into the general ed environment 80% or more of the day, 40 to 79% of the day, less than 40% of the day, or in a separate type of placement that is outside of the school district. And you can see there that we're, in terms of general ed 80% or more, the DPI target is that the district should be at 70% or more of our students should be in that general education environment 80% or more of their day. And at the local level, we're at 89% of our students with disabilities being in that general ed environment at that rate, which is a fantastic data point for the district to be very proud of, that we really do look to provide those services in that general education environment first. And that speaks to our co-teaching practices and our inclusive nature. And then also looking at letter B up there, to be under 21% of our students in the general ed 40 to 79, and we are well below that standard at 7.75%. General ed less than 40%, we're significantly lower than the DPI target of 7.9%. Separate placement, we're a little bit above what that DPI target is, but based upon our numbers, a kid or two in that environment will drastically adjust what that percentage is. So we try to keep our students within district, but we also have to legally provide a continuum of services for our students, which is inclusive of that separate placement. So IEP teams, along with parents, are very collaborative in that process and making the determination together if that placement is the best option.
So Tim, this is all of our students, correct? All of our
students with disabilities, correct.
Does it look different if we would look at just secondary levels, middle school or high school, or just at the elementary school? Or are these pretty representative of?
I would say they're very representative. And really what you see is that the bulk of our kids, to hit that 89% level For category A, general ed environment, 80% or more, it has to be across all levels, or we really wouldn't be hitting that mark. That is significantly above that DPI target. And typically when you look at a lot of the districts across the state, not many are approaching that level of inclusiveness. So that's a really high mark for us.
And secondly, is this all students with disabilities, or how do we account for students that get speech and language?
Included.
They are?
That's all included, correct. All of that is included within this data sample, correct. So Joe, if you're thinking of it in terms of if a student is only receiving speech therapy, yes, they would, that group, if that's the only service they receive, of course, they would be in that 80% or more of the day. But that's why I kind of presented that breakdown at the beginning of how many kids we have in the different disability areas. So you can really see that a large part of our students with other disability areas are also definitely hitting into that 80% or more of the day placement.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Anything else on that one? I know that's a lot of information, but it really speaks to what Greendale stands for in terms of having really high levels of inclusive practices.
Does this include students, because we can educate them all the way up to age 21, right, in some cases?
Correct.
So does this include all students
Yes.
all the way up?
Yes, absolutely. Good question. Correct.
You know, we allow for citizen comments at the end of the board meeting as well.
Question.
Yes.
Is there any point where we see some of the students with disabilities go off an IEP?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Is that recorded or?
Yeah, so we review, every 3 years, students receive a reevaluation, and basically at that point, we're looking at do they continue to meet the criteria to receive special education services. And pretty regularly, we have students who no longer have the need to receive special education services.
And do we keep data for that?
We do. I do not have that included in the presentation, but if you'd want to see a follow-up on that, I could definitely provide that.
That'd be great. Thank
Sure.
you.
And that's the goal, right? The goal is to not need your IEP eventually.
Well, and the goal is to really meet kids where they are and give them the tools, the skills, the abilities that they need to access that general education curriculum. Ultimately, if we can create that level of independence, that they can do that without the support of staff to meet that is our ultimate goal, that we create that level of independence that they can manage some of those things that they need within the school day on their own. Absolutely.
Sure. And one more question. I'm sorry, Kathy.
That's okay.
Just a general, so there's 353 IEPs currently. In the last 5 years, what is that is there any trend in any way in terms of IEPs?
I would say that our number of students with disabilities is increasing. I think that in addition to that, I think we're seeing a slight increase in terms of the significance of the disabilities in which we're servicing within the district. I don't have data tonight on that information, but I could look back at historical trends to see exactly where we're at. But we definitely have had an increase in terms of the number of students with disabilities, yes. Yep.
Which I was going to comment, and I'll share that later in this, because I testified at Whitewater in particular about special education. I think it's very important that hopefully in this next biennium budget that they increase the allocation for special education, because I believe it's only funded at 28% right now, and that's not enough, especially with the numbers increasing for the students.
Correct. Yeah, it's been very stagnant over the years, for sure. Absolutely, Kathy.
And then I'll add to that. I think you'll see that as we talk about the budgets, that we've consistently increased the number of special education teachers that we've needed, the number of paraprofessional special education support staff that we've needed. You heard them talk a little bit about the co-teaching. Where again, so now you've got 2 teachers in a single classroom, so that impacts your FTE for teaching. So you'll see some of that as we go through the budgets, where we have been allocating resources to support students with disabilities.
I was just going to comment too that, I know Mary had mentioned that it's a goal maybe to be off the IEPs, but I think it's important that we're helping transition our students to their post-secondary. And just from personal experience with my own son, I know that he was able to receive some accommodations with the post-secondary. So I think
Absolutely.
it's very important that, we do follow those trends and see where the students are at and prepare them for those next opportunities. So they may or may not be getting off an IEP, but just continuing some of the services that they've received. I know it's not as in-depth what they do at the post-secondary level.
Correct. Right.
But things such as separate setting or extra time are very important for some students and will likely be that way for the rest of their life.
Correct. Right.
And Tim, I'm sorry, Tim, one more question for you.
Yep.
And it's more just a clarification for the record. Could you talk a little bit about special ed funding and where when we're increasing how much for, where the funding comes for each student and special ed teachers? Is that so, or maybe Jonathan knows that more than you, I don't know, but.
Well, so we get contributions to the district from under IDEA. So there are definitely contributions that are made towards us, but we also then have to match what's being contributed. So as our costs go up, we have to maintain our maintenance of effort. So we have to continue to show that we're continuing to provide services to our students at a budget level to keep that in balance. But we also have other opportunities for funding sources through grant opportunities as well, whether it's transition grants or we're doing post-secondary surveys to try to generate revenue for our students with disabilities. So we're constantly trying to leverage those, but a bulk of what we receive comes from that federal level, and then the rest comes from local funds.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. The next slide again talks about that educational environment, but the previous slide was geared more towards students age 6 through 21. This slide is around preschool educational environment. So this is for students age 3 through 5, and where we provide students services to our youngest students. So you can see here percent of children with IEPs age 3 through 5 attending a regular early childhood program. Our local number, we're at 63% roughly, and that DPI target again is 37.5. So we're significantly above in terms of our inclusiveness around that practice. And then percent of children with IEPs 3 through 5 attending a separate special education class, school, or residential facility. Our local number, again, 12.7, with that DPI target to be at or below 17.25. So again, that really speaks to our inclusive nature and how we develop our program. And a big contributor to that is having access to our Time for Learning 4K charter, where we can provide services and push into that environment for our youngest students.
And Tim, some of our youngest learners are identified, what is that day called, where
the Child Development Days, correct.
Right. So
correct.
My question is, with COVID and some of that being not in person, has that impacted us these past couple of years at all? Where we're not able to identify them, or we're not able to get to the families and have conversations with them?
So we've continued, and what that's called, Joe, is our child find obligation. So we have an obligation to locate and identify students with disabilities in our local community. And obviously COVID has significantly impacted, where in the past we would run 3 times per year and run some child development days and really look at, if parents have concerns regarding their children. What we've done this year is we've had it become more of a consultation, where they can reach out to district office or whatever the neighborhood school would be and talk through what their concerns are developmentally for their individual student. And then we set next steps, whether that's doing a speech screener or we do some type of assessment to determine if we need to move forward with a full-blown evaluation. So even though we haven't had the opportunity to have what historically has been done around Child Find, we found creative ways to continue to have that connection with the community if there's concerns related to a disability.
Great to hear that. Thank you, Tim.
Yep, absolutely. So that was the last indicator from DPI that I wanted to share with you guys tonight, and I'll move into some STAR assessment data. And the first slide talks about STAR reading assessment data. And what I did here is I tracked STAR reading assessment data for students with disabilities from fall 2019 to winter of 2020. And then again, we didn't deliver the STAR assessment last spring due to the closure, but then I added in where we were in fall of 2020 and now again in winter of 2021, with the spring assessment still coming up in May. So from this, you can see we started off fall of 2019 at about 18.31% of our students with disabilities who took the STAR reading assessment were considered advanced or proficient. Where we started off in fall of 2020, we were at 18.4. So we're still we're right where we were that following year. What's impacted this year, and I think this really shows the impact that COVID had, was that jump then that did not occur necessarily this year in comparison to where we were from fall to winter of the previous year. We did make an increase, so that's a positive that we're continuing to grow, and our kids came back at a pretty good rate in fall of 2020, but we want to see that definitely jump forward again when we deliver our spring assessment.
Do these numbers include virtual and in-person students?
Correct, yes.
So I would be curious to know, like with the virtual students, because I just feel it's very difficult for schools to provide the services for virtual students. I'd be interested to know what the difference was for those virtual students.
Sure, absolutely. Yep. Okay, our next slide.
Regarding intellectual integrity, is that what you're getting at, Kathy?
Well, I just am wondering if there's a bigger dip with the, that the virtual students maybe were missing or lower because they didn't have that in-person services provided.
Oh, okay. I only raised it because I think that the big concern with virtual testing is the intellectual integrity, right?
There's a set of protocols for STAR for virtual testing, and which included the teacher monitoring
like
assessment via video and online. So there was, in terms of the test administration for STAR, it was monitored and proctored according to protocols. So the information here is really more around
actual performance.
Was there a different instructional, did the differences in instruction impact the amount of increase in proficiency that we saw?
All right, our next slide talks about STAR math assessment data, percent proficient. And in the area of math, we saw we started out in fall of 2020 below where we were fall of 2019. And we did not see as dramatic of a jump from our fall to winter administration, but we did see a pretty good gain from that 25.98% advanced proficient jumping up to that 31.71. So again, we're confident and hopeful that that trend line continues to go up for us in terms of our STAR math assessment data. And the last STAR early literacy data is our percent proficient in this area. You see we started off fall of 2020 down at 28.57% advanced proficient, and we made a huge jump from fall to winter up to 45.45% advanced proficient. So we're really excited to see where that number falls once we hit our spring assessment window as well.
It's important to note that early literacy is given to kindergarten and first grade students.
Correct.
So this is around those basic early literacy skills of phonics and some other aspects of reading readiness. And what you see in the fall of 2020, if you consider where our first graders were at, you are seeing the impact of 3 months of lack of face-to-face instruction for those students. And to see that it has recovered and is nearly where we were in the winter of 2020 is encouraging. This is just students with disabilities, but we see similar trends with our population at large, which we'll be reviewing as part of our recovery planning for the fall.
Absolutely.
So what, if any, of this information has to be reported to the state? is any of this required? I know they have some waivers and things with testing right now.
No, there's no
with
requirement to
forward.
report. Yeah, there's no requirement to report our local benchmarks, our local screeners. We are providing it out of transparency to the public so they can see the impact and so that you as a board can review the impact of the instruction and the money that is spent to provide instruction for students, but there is no state reporting requirement with this.
Is there ever with STAR?
STAR is not required. We're required to have a screener, and we are required to, the early literacy is the one, we use STAR as the one that is funded, so, but it's not required to be
Reported.
It's required that it's given.
And can I ask one more question on that topic of intellectual integrity? So the people who created the STAR exam, I forget their Renaissance, so they came up with intellectual integrity, conditions or policies, but Forward did not. The Forward test did not.
I'm going to defer to Maggie because you guys went through the process of the online assessments for STAR, but there was a protocol for online students to take the STAR.
I'm not describing.
Yeah,
I remember
just-
that. It's just, I'm just kind of, but Forward required that they have to take it in person. The virtual students
Correct.
are not taking the Forward, is that correct?
Well, that's not correct. We
No.
have virtual students who are taking the Forward, but they have to come in person
Correct.
to take the Forward exam on a school server.
Sure.
So it has to be secure that way. The STAR testing was, they had different protocols, such as we were able to use something called Go Guardian and watch students take it. And that's how we did that protocol. And we followed that protocol from Renaissance, which is the owner of the STAR. So we just followed their protocol for that. But according to the Forward and from the state, they said they had to be on student servers. So that is why we followed that protocol. So there is a difference.
What
Yeah, thank you.
percentage of the students came back from virtual to take the test, you know?
We're still in the middle of Forward right now, so I can come back to you and get those numbers for you.
Yeah, we're administering those right now on Wednesdays. We're currently right kind of smack in the middle of where that is. I know without giving any specific data, we did not have a lot of opt-outs in terms of coming in for that assessment. And to be honest with you, I've been there on a couple of the Wednesdays, and it's fantastic to see the kids coming in. For some of them, the first time this year coming in person and like seeing their teachers and seeing their peers, and it's like, oh, you really do exist and you're here. And it's just been really cool to see that process. But the number is small. We've had a high level of engagement in terms of them coming in, and I think a lot of that is based upon parents wanting to see exactly where their kids are. Now, granted, that's only one measure, but it is a piece of data that's relevant and we can look at and analyze. So I think there's been high participation.
Good.
All right, so we'll shift gears a little bit here and move away from some of the data and the reporting around special education and get more into the special education department's response to COVID and the closure which occurred in spring. And so one of the first things that we did after spring and going into summer is we developed something called a FERPA form. And really what we wanted to do is to allow parents to basically provide some agreement that they were willing to allow their student to receive special education services within a virtual environment. I know a lot of parents had concern regarding services in that virtual environment, and we really wanted to make sure that parents understood that there could be opportunities for their student to receive services, individual or small group, and inherent in that process is that they could be identified then as having being a student with a disability by being in that virtual environment from the home setting. So we went through this process of having our families provide us permission under the FERPA form to receive those services. If they did not, we definitely collaborated with the parents around what were their concerns regarding the virtual services for special education and worked with them individually to kind of work through what virtual learning would look like for their particular student. So that was kind of step one in our process. Following that, our next step that really kicked off in fall was the development of what we call distance learning plans. And the DLP was created as an extension of the services and supports identified within the most current IEP. Those services and supports within the DLP were discussed with the parent. We held meetings and talked through what those plans would look like with the intent of that DLP that we would enact that in case we shifted to fully virtual learning, which, hopefully this wasn't foreshadowing, but we did end up making that shift. And it was very beneficial that we went through all of the hours and meetings. Now you're looking at 353 IEPs within the district. That means we developed 353 distant learning plans in the fall. And that's a huge credit to our special education staff. And the time it took for them to put into that and the amount of thought and planning and collaboration that went into that process was really quite amazing. And it really gave us the opportunity to provide really high quality services once we did shift to virtual. And knowing with a distance learning plan that minutes are not always going to be exactly the same just because some minutes are not conducive to that virtual environment, but we collaborated around what makes the most sense when we do shift to virtual. And we wanted to really make sure that we created that so it was very individualized for each student. Our next slide is talking about something called additional services. So right now, we're wrapping up this process, but when school buildings close, some special education IEP services and supports may not have been provided. So this is talking back to the time frame of last spring. When it was the emergency shutdown, we had to quickly pivot to virtual learning. No one was really prepared at that time, and special education was one of those areas that we were kind of building it as we went. So with that, some services and supports may not have been delivered or provided. And because of that, it may have resulted in some students either losing skills or knowledge that they previously learned, or they were unable to then make progress towards their IEP goals or within their classes. So what that meant is that some of our students with disabilities and with IEPs, they may need what's called additional services added to the current IEP. To receive those additional services, the student had to have been receiving special education services when we went to the closure in spring. So newly identified students with disabilities this year would not qualify for additional services because there were not any services provided at the time of the closure. So that's a little bit of background on that. But when we're looking at our COVID response on the next slide, we talk about some key considerations regarding the need and the amount of additional services. So these were some assumptions that we kind of walked into this process with. Again, this is a process that no one has really gone through before. So we identified some things that we wanted to keep in mind. Number one, IEP teams are not required to replace every minute a student missed. And a lot of this is from guidance from the Department of Public Instruction in terms of how we should process through these meetings. Additional services were not automatically required for every student. Additional services should be what the student needs to address loss of skills or knowledge and address new needs which developed since the closure. So for some of our students, because of the closure, there are now new needs that we need to address. So we also have to consider that as we provide additional services to our students. And then finally, we need to consider additional services, and they should be provided in what's called the least restrictive environment. And that goes all the way back to our indicator slides where we talked about where our students receive their special education services, and a lot of our kids are receiving them in that general education environment. So that's something that we have to consider as well. On the next slide, this just kind of tells us of where we are right now and the conversations that we're having and what we're talking about within those collaborative conversations with the parent and the IEP team. So we're really looking at the child's individual strengths and needs. We're talking about how much regression the child has had during that spring closure when buildings were closed. how much progress the child made compared to students without IEPs. So really looking at what did everybody else, how did everyone else progress, and then how did the student with the disability progress in comparison to that same age peer. What, if any, new disability-related needs the child may have, again, due to that closure? And then how quickly the child is able to learn new skills or knowledge. So for some of our kids, they may have demonstrated regression. They may not have progressed as we would have liked them to see. But then in the fall, when we had the return to in-person learning and we were able to provide services, they were able to recoup those skills at a fast enough rate to make sure that there wasn't a significant amount of regression. So those are some of the factors that we looked at when we were making the determination of whether or not students with disabilities qualified for and needed additional services. So the next slide talks about next steps. Again, we're wrapping up those individual meetings with families to make that determination. We're looking at providing those services during summer school because one of those large factors is providing the services within that least restrictive environment. The summer school setting allows us to provide those services in an inclusive environment with same age peers. So that's a huge bonus for us versus providing these services, before school or after school, or pulling kids from their current schedule to provide more services within the current school day, which would then potentially remove them from peers. So we're looking to provide the services during the summer school schedule. Once we have all of our information, we'll gather our list of students who have qualified for additional services, and then we'll begin the process of developing that staffing model. Julie's ready to rock and roll on it, so we'll work together on that. And we'll find a way to deliver the services with fidelity with what the IEP teams have identified as areas of need, and just provide really good, high-quality services to hopefully bridge that gap, which happened in spring of last year. And my final slide here just talks about some department next steps. A lot of this was really tied to some indicators and some data and our response to COVID. But also the district is really looking to continue some initiatives in terms of long-term planning and professional development. And that's inclusive of co-teaching. We're going to start venturing into the process of writing college and career-ready IEPs so that we're writing our IEPs based upon grade level standards to really have rigor involved in how we're grading, how we're assessing our students with disabilities and how they're making progress to the general education curriculum. We're also looking to increase strategies that increase student independence. That speaks to some of the questions that occurred earlier, where we're really striving for our students to be able to do things independently without the assistance of adults. We have ongoing professional development that we'll plan for our paraprofessional staff. Our paraprofessionals play such a significant role in delivering services to our students with disabilities, and they're really unsung heroes in terms of providing the services for all of our kids during the course of the day. And then also we'll be venturing into some curriculum and intervention review. We want to really get a good gauge as to what interventions we have within the district, which ones are working well, which ones maybe are not doing the best for us, and then identify if there's other things that we need to look at in terms of getting things in-house that can help our students continue to make progress. So with that, I know that was a lot of information. I hope it gave you some good knowledge base about some of the things that we look at in terms of are we being successful or not as a department, but then also gave a little bit of background knowledge about some of the big ticket items that we did in response to COVID.
Thank you, Tim. I just have one more question.
Yes.
Very impressive, the distance learning plans and the COVID response, and I thought, really impressive. I think most special ed departments are still trying to figure things out. So
sure. Thank you.
You were definitely ahead of the game on that one. I'm just curious what the caseload is for your special education teachers. How many what's their caseload?
It varies by grade level. We do have some policy around, not policy, but we have a caseload and workload calculator around where we like those to be. The DPI workload calculator gives us a number, and I don't want to quote what that number is, but we're typically within the recommended range of our work, and we go a workload calculator route a little bit over than what we do a caseload. So a caseload would be just raw numbers of how many kids you're servicing. When you look at a workload calculator, you're looking more at the significance of the student need and calculating in how much more time goes into speech services, OT, PT, behavioral needs that the student may have. So we try to keep our department underneath that DPI recommended workload number. But at the elementary level, I would venture to say, and this is a ballpark, so don't necessarily quote me on it, but I want to say we're around 8 to 10 at the elementary level in terms of a raw caseload. I would say at the middle school level, we're probably around the 12 to 16 range, some lower, some higher, but again, that accounts for some of the significance of disabilities. So the higher level of disability-related need, the lower the caseload we try to get for that individual staff member. And then at the high school level, I would say we're in that 16 to 20 range would be my ballpark.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, we had several questions throughout the presentation, so are there any other?
Yeah, there's no question slide at the end because you asked throughout.
That's right. No, that's
Which
perfect.
is good.
Ask them when you got them.
Right. Any other questions or comments?
I just think you did a nice job laying this out for us to give a picture, because I knew COVID was having an impact on students, but to see how thoughtful you guys have been through the process, I think is really good.
Yeah, and it was really important to try to stagger some of these large initiatives, such as the additional service meetings and the distance learning plans, just so that it wasn't overwhelming, number one, to families, but then also overwhelming to staff. And it's been a very taxing year on special education staff, shifting in and out from virtual to in-person, and the amount of additional processes that have happened. And they've been troopers. They've been ready to take on that challenge, and they've done just a fantastic job doing it. And that really speaks to how dedicated they are and how they have such good relationships with our families. And that's what makes it work. Sorry.
Actually, I guess two questions. One was around the numbers for additional services. I mean, I don't know, from a qualification standpoint, maybe you mentioned this, but I was just curious what that was. And then the other question is more around with the strategies for independence. Is there certain things that we've seen that have been working well, that we're kind of leaning into, or that we're hoping to explore in those areas for increasing independence?
In terms of the additional services, we're calculating that now. I'd want to say out of the 353, we're probably around, my last count, we didn't have all of them completed as of yet, but I want to say what came across my desk was about 100 students or so that met that had a need for additional services, and that's give or take, but that's kind of a ballpark of what I've been reviewing and seeing. In terms of that gradual release, or in terms of that independence, we really look at a gradual release, right? We try to teach skills in isolation, and then we try for students to then be able to transfer those skills across multiple settings. So if we can practice in a one-on-one or a small group setting, for example, in terms of behavioral or social skills with students, and we can do a social skills group, and we can talk about a certain idea, and then we can observe the student engaging in that process within the classroom environment. That gives us the opportunity to say, okay, this student is now really ready to fly with this. We don't necessarily need to have that student with a para to support them for behavioral concerns. Or another opportunity for that, or an example of that gives you a good picture, would be the use of assistive technology. If you can teach students how to use Google Read and Write, or some of those strategies that they can then develop some independence in using, then we no longer have to have someone who's reading a test aloud or reading directions or text to speech where you no longer need a scribe. Those are some natural progressions to creating that level of independence for our students.
All right, thanks, Tim. Thank you for your time and your report. I think when I look at the mission statement, we talk about by creating multiple opportunities for learning, each student's unique abilities are developed to achieve success and contribute positively to our global society. And I think your presentation tonight shows, the dedication, the investment, and the work that's going to help achieve that overall mission statement. So thank you.
And Joe, I think it's also relevant that as you review student equity and anti-racism policy, number 7 in those equity non-negotiables is educational equity is an intentional distribution of district resources amongst schools, students, and staff based on what each student needs to achieve universal equity goals. And so that clarification around equity versus equality, some of our students with IEPs need more resources, more time, more supports to have access to that same general curriculum, and that is one of the considerations that's there. So as we're looking at the equity non-negotiables, what you're seeing is an application of that in process.
And one thing just to note too, through some of the groups for parents with kids with disabilities, you're seeing time and time, and this is anecdotal, yes, but Greendale being a destination district because of the work that you're doing and your team's doing. So that probably adds to the growing population, because when a house comes for sale, we're seeing people say, can you post this in these groups and let us know before you actually put it on the market, because they want to come in. So, and I've seen that numerous times in some of the groups I'm part of. So.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
All right, continuing on. Next item on the agenda is agenda item 6.3, an update on our welcoming diversity action plans.
Yes, so you have a full report in the packet. The Welcoming Diversity Action Plan has been in place for approximately 18 months, and there were quite a few tasks within 4 goal areas. That is education, and that's both school education and community education, policies and practices, or policies and processes, which includes the village and the school district, programming, which is community area programming that offers diverse perspectives, and then representation in our practices around the community. And among those tasks, to date, what you're seeing in here is an update that about 75 to 80% of those tasks that were outlined have either been completed or are continuing and in process, including the policy that was presented for first reading tonight. That was one of the action plan goals. So the team that was formed around the Welcoming Diversity Action Plan is a school district team, and it's a school district team that was put into motion by administration, meaning the superintendent, and we have invited the village to be a partner in this work to make sure that our community is welcoming, and we've invited community members to participate and support the work as we move forward. So from a structure perspective, there are 4 teams that meet, and any community member can engage, and there's a steering team that meets that is co-chaired by me, Todd Michaels representing the village, and Dee Marriott representing the community. And so as we think about that structure and approaching near completion or achievement of the tasks that were originally outlined in the Welcoming Diversity Action Plan, we need to consider how we move forward on welcoming diversity within our school community and within the larger community, although it's a school focus because it is something that was started by the schools. So as we think about that, there's a couple of possibilities of what could happen. One of those things is that we can reconvene a large team to review the tasks that have been accomplished and to set new tasks in motion, and then continue status quo. A second option is that as we enter our strategic plan work team for the school district on this Friday, and bring in the voices of a variety of stakeholders from the community listening sessions and from a community survey, it is possible, and I would say likely, based on what I've seen in the early reviews of the listening sessions, is that we may have goals that are directly related to our strategic plan to hold us accountable for equity goals and equity tasks within the community, in which case the Welcoming Diversity Action Plan teams may become advisory to the school district to hold us accountable for those goals. And so I just wanted to bring forward that we're reaching a point at which we may need to revisit a plan, or we may need to revisit a structure in which we address some of our community goals around welcoming diversity within the community. And so just for the board to have some conversation about where you see that structure shifting or not. And it might not be something that we can discuss intelligently until we know what the strategic planning direction is for the school district in the coming months. So with that, I'll take questions.
So I think, Kim, you've highlighted a number of items that were highlighted as goals. And to your point, the majority, like you said, probably 80-90% of those goals have been achieved or are very close to completion. So congratulations on your work on that, and congratulations to the whole team for the work there. So this is really kind of a look forward as to how do we see this group continuing. I'll speak for myself. I think this is important work that, we brought in Maggie Olson to focus not only on curriculum, but, diversity and inclusion. So I think it's important that we continue to focus on that. But what it looks like is probably where we want to have the conversation as to should we reconvene another strategic, or I don't want to say strategic planning group, but another welcoming diversity group. Does it kind of become part of our overall strategic plan? Does it become, an administrative committee? I guess when I think of that, Kim, you already have, you don't call it a superintendent's advisory committee, but you already have.
I have a citizen advisory team.
Citizen advisory team.
And anyone's welcome, so if you want to join me on the next one, we meet quarterly.
Yeah.
Please email me.
Jonathan, you've got a citizen budget and finance team. So very similarly, we could, as we have a conversation, we could have a citizen diversity and inclusion team, and I don't want to assign it, but that seems to fall under our director of curriculum and inclusion and diversity. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there as a possibility, and want to get people's thoughts and reactions. And do they see things going into a different direction? Do they see things staying status quo? I don't get the sense that anyone is saying, we're finished here, let's close up the books, put it back on the shelf, and we'll address it when we need to, because I think we've all said that this work is too important to not have it at the forefront of everything that we're doing. So I'm comfortable and confident saying that, I think, is what the board is feeling. But
yeah, and I guess the way I look at it, I've been serving on this steering committee since the beginning, is that I see an opportunity for us to streamline what we're doing. And I don't want to say bring it back to the district like it's been separate from the district, but I think it needs to be encompassed more by the district, if that makes sense. And so I don't know, Maggie, if that is going to fall on your shoulders, but I see this as an opportunity as we are doing our new strategic plan to bring this all together and make it a heart of what we're doing. So.
And I would agree with Kathy. I think it's important work. I don't think we need to put it back on the shelf, but bring it under the district. My only concern is how do we continue to keep the village either included or advised on?
You're the liaison.
That is a good point. Yeah. As the citizen group would come together, we could certainly reach out and see if there's anyone specific from the village board that would want to participate or do that, so that they are engaged.
I mean, at the very least, an invitation. I don't know where they see themselves, but
when we think about the work teams that are forming around the strategic plan, are there members of this committee that are going to be serving on that?
Yes.
Okay. So I mean,
That's a
the
good
good
point.
part is, I think your comment, Kim, around, do we need to kind of wait and see what happens, from that perspective? I think ultimately to make a final decision, I think yes is my answer to that. But I think, I like the idea of exploring some opportunities and just, brainstorming. And I'm glad to hear that obviously folks that have been investing so much time and energy into this are also going to be leaning into our strategic planning work team. So
And they were part of definitely this is something Kim, it's not that she's just bringing it up. This was a conversation that was had with the steering team. And
we met a couple of weeks ago and we
Yeah,
did have
and
a
I think-
conversation about in preparation for this report.
I think they're seeing, just from what I gathered, Kim, and maybe you can answer this too, but I feel that they're also seeing this as an opportunity to, as I said before, streamline it, and, their involvement still will be, possible.
Instrumental and possible.
Yeah,
yep.
and instrumental, I mean, because they have really taken the lead in some nice activities and things that have been going on, but, so it's not like it's a surprise to anyone that, we're talking about, I guess, revising, revision, I don't know what you would call it.
Yeah, I don't think we drop off because there are still items that need to do, but depending on how the strategic plan manifests, there may be some transitioning of what hasn't been accomplished from that list of the Welcoming Diversity Action Plan. And let's make sure that we continue to work together to achieve those goals so that we reach 100%. And what new goals do we have? And if we don't have new goals that manifest within the strategic plan, we may need to revisit this team and do it differently.
one of the other components, which I think is the most important component on this, is the students and their voice on this work. And I know we have obviously a lot of work that's happening from the students here in Greendale. And so how does that connect back to really driving this work forward? Although they might not be official members of the Welcoming Diversity Committee.
We do have some students
Okay.
participate.
But we also have the student equity.
Student equity
That's
team
correct.
and some
Which is a separate group. And Maggie, are you the coach or the mentor? I don't know how to define your role, but
I'll call myself an advisor.
I like coach better.
Or coach, whatever. So the student equity team has been really instrumental. A lot of the different things that we've done this year around equity, especially at the high school, but they've helped run campaigns K-12 and have also have given feedback on the action plan itself and what ways we play in that as students on the student equity team.
I'm going to agree with Thor and Kim, too, that I think it makes sense. Obviously, the committee has worked hard for 2 years. They've accomplished all the goals that they set. Now let's see what the community comes back with in terms of strategic plan and see if, where those puzzle pieces would fit. I wasn't on the committee. I can't speak for the committee, but having done committee work and the hard work that this committee did do, they probably might be ready to let some other people pick up a baton. I'm imagining, and carry that a little further, and maybe just into some and you've already alluded to that. Maggie's already working in that capacity, so. Those are just my thoughts, so.
Like I said, I think it brings it closer to home, bring it back to the heart of Greendale schools. This is what we are about, and this is, where we're going. I don't want to say they are two separate things, but I think drawing it in further would be helpful at this point.
It almost institutionalizes some of the work.
Yeah.
So the work has happened from the community, which is great. That was necessary 2 years ago. But now the points that they've identified and they've highlighted, I think Greendale Schools has taken it to heart and then are saying, we'll own what we can own, and it'll now become part of how we operate going forward. We still want to have that community voice, so we still want to have an administrative committee that we'll tap into and work with. So it's just a continual evolution.
Yeah, I think the community voice is really important around this topic especially. So I really want to thank the committee. And when you read the list of accomplishments, it's very impressive. And now I think incorporating it into the strategic plan makes a lot of common sense.
It's good to hear when you look at what's coming out of some of those conversations, that there are elements that are coming out of that. So that's encouraging to hear. Okay.
Just curious if Paris or Axel have any thoughts on this as well.
Paris, were you able to hear that? We're talking about the Welcoming Diversity Action Plan and the Student Equity Plan. Anything that you'd like to share or any comments that either of you want to highlight?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of work that the student equity team has done in terms of, I've been in it since 8th grade, and I feel like that we've been able to implement more ideas than we have in the past and kind of share more specifically to the community what we're doing. One way that we did that is the Instagram page, which I think was really helpful, especially in terms of this year's curriculum and circumstances where there's lots of virtual students, but they were still able to recognize that there is a group at our school that is doing work towards equity and inclusion. And we've also opened up the platform to more students to join. So that's been helpful. Last week we had a meeting with our new students, and although we don't have a lot of time or more meetings before the end of the school year, we do have a pretty good agenda in terms of what we may want to work on next year, and that's something we're going to discuss in the next meeting because we have so many different voices and perspectives and people now, whereas in the past it was secluded to people that were just invited to the group, whereas now we have people that are really wanting to commit and are passionate about the work that's being done. All that being said, however, there's still a lot that I think our school in general can do. And I think we're kind of at a point with a new advisor where we're reshaping the way that the student equity team looks and the way we're going to operate, go forth with campaigns, hopefully in a more normal setting of school next year. And that may include making it more aware to students what we are and what we want to be. And yeah, there's just specific goals. I know like the TNT was talking about hiring more students, not students, staff of color, or just other things that can maybe do in the Greendale Community Village or events even outside the whole community to make sure that Greendale's a more diverse and inclusive community. So, yeah.
Thanks, Paris. And you're right. You spent this last year or so putting together the framework for this group, and you did that, with the coronavirus and the pandemic, hitting us all. So thank you for your time there.
So that provides some good direction. I don't think we're going to make any significant changes. I think we're going to see what the will of the community is and what we hear from the work teams, and revisit in summer with some updates on what additional work has been accomplished and what the community will is about moving forward.
Right. Good conversation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next item on the agenda, we add this summary of board member professional development. So is there any webinars or any professional development that has happened since our previous board meeting?
I'll go ahead.
Please.
I was pulled between two over the spring break. The National School Board Association had their annual conference. It was virtual this year. I was also testifying at the same time in Whitewater, so I got torn between the two. But because it was virtual, I was able to go back and watch attend several sessions. But I was able to attend Thursday and Saturday's session. I think it was Saturdays. I won't go through all of them, but I did like the one topic I attended was, has your board made a difference in developing a continuous improvement index? And I think as we have our board retreat this year, I think it would be good for us to maybe have those conversations and to use data to help us determine what kind of impact we're having as a board. So I thought that was good. There were a couple sessions I attended on equity, school transformation with an equity lens, and mental health equitable responses within school systems. And both of those, we had discussions about what our districts are doing for in lines of equity. And I'm happy to say Greendale is above the threshold as far as the conversations I had. It seems like we were right up there with, you know, keeping that as a focus. And then one other one that I just was curious about was where other districts across the country are at with this whole COVID thing. So there was a discussion about, you know, how schools are doing in light of the pandemic and so forth. So I can send you guys more notes or share more later, but the links are actually still open. I want to say through June or July, so those sessions might be available to others on the board if anyone's interested. And there was a webinar I attended, and I can't recall what it was, but they have them over the lunch hour, and my lunch hour just happens to fall at that 12 until 12:30 time. So I don't know if any of you guys have that opportunity, but WASB has been running a lot of workshops over the lunch hour. So that's mine.
And I'll piggyback on Kathy. I attended 2 webinars as well, thanks to Mary Ann as part of, and Kim as part of my onboarding process. So WASB does have some really good information, and it's pretty easy to access now from a virtual standpoint. So just key work of school boards and roles and responsibilities. I did ask for some further handouts that I could pass on to the rest of the board if they're interested, just specifically regarding roles and responsibilities of the board. So it's been this gives me an opportunity to thank Kim and Marianne for a really thorough and helpful onboarding process.
Great.
Then I attended the MMAC's Region of Choice. I guess they do these quite often, maybe monthly or every other month. And Julie and Maggie were both on that call, so I was on there for work, but it was also because we're signed the diversity pledge for my work, and obviously Greendale did as well. But it was interesting because there was a series of different groups that they partnered with that are the Hispanic Collaborative and also the Business Council and the African American Leadership Alliance, MKE, all joined and kind of shared some of the things that they're doing from their perspectives that might tie in, obviously even from Greendale's perspective as well, but it's not as focused, obviously, on teachers. It's more generically focused on increasing, in many cases, even kind of entrepreneurs, not necessarily the teacher profession, but nonetheless kind of exposing and making sure that we're inspiring all these different populations to see things that maybe they weren't necessarily seeing before in their traditional routes. So pretty neat to see that come together, and obviously as opportunities continue to rise, we'll share those. And obviously I know Maggie and Julie are constantly looking at how do we make sure that when we have opportunities that we're putting it in front of as many people as humanly possible to make sure that we get the best qualified teachers and we have a diverse population that's seeing and having access to our opportunities.
Yeah, in Thor, we are actually meeting with the Hispanic Collaborative on Thursday at 10. Julie and I both emailed her during the presentation, and we're really excited to work with her and talk about pipelines into coming into Greendale.
Perfect.
All right, anything else? Good updates. Calendar review, anything on the calendar that's coming up? I know because we have the fourth board meeting, because we have the second board meeting the fourth Monday of this month of April, our next board meeting is in a week. So we've got that coming up quickly.
Just the work team this weekend.
Work team on Friday and then Saturday as well.
Okay.
And then for all of your mulch needs, the Greendale Education Foundation has Mulch Madness going on as we speak. So that's April 24th through Friday the 30th. 10% of the net sale at Boomels, when you mention that, comes to Greendale Education Foundation. So even though it doesn't always feel like spring, it is coming sometime soon.
It's
here in
going to be
Wisconsin.
80 tomorrow, so
It'll
what a
be 80
perfect
tomorrow,
time! What a perfect
30
time to order your mulch.
Exactly.
To mulch up, make sure you say, I want to support the Greendale Education Foundation when you order.
Very good. Anything else? Calendar review. I know the village is doing their Pet Palooza early May.
May something, I should know that.
Well, Mother's
So-
Day.
Yeah.
Of course, it's around Mother's Day.
Saturday the 8th, is that?
Could be. So we've got that coming up. All right. Anything else with calendar review? We talked a little bit about board committee reports. You mentioned the Education Foundation. Anything else with the board committee?
Just that I'm continuing to attend the SWSA meetings, and we've had really nice opportunities throughout the whole year to talk with 2 doctors from Children's Hospital. And I'm assuming through your calls as a superintendent, you're probably talking to these doctors on a regular basis. It's just nice hearing from other school districts across the state, and especially in our area, how people have been, grappling with this whole COVID thing. So that's pretty much been the focus of the SWSA. Jonathan, I don't know if you've been in any of the recent, they have like 2 meetings now. They have one for, school board members, and then they have the one for the full administration. So I don't know if you have anything to add.
Okay.
Oh.
All righty. Anything else on board committee reports? Otherwise, then Kathy for the legislative updates.
All right, Kim didn't take any of them tonight, so I will make it quick. Wisconsin is receiving $175 million in federal funds to implement COVID testing programs in schools. The first phase of this testing will include options for schools to begin conducting testing in spring and summer of 2021. Future phases will expand testing to schools in fall of 2021 and during the 2021-22 school year. I'm not sure if that will be a future conversation that we'll all be having. I don't know if you want to even say anything to that, Kim?
Our safety and recovery teams will be discussing that in the near future. And we have been talking with the health department about their recommendations and advice.
Whether to do it or not even? Okay. Yeah, I just thought that was an interesting role to put schools in. Then the second thing I have is the budget hearing. What am I? Okay, so this is actually what I did do. On behalf of the board, I went to Whitewater on April 9th. Jonathan, Kim, and I had met, and I think Jonathan and Kim more or less drafted what I said. But we took our public policy priorities and aligned those with our asks. And I think that was a very good approach to take. As a matter of fact, and I talked to Chris Kulo from WASB. He was very impressed with the way we did that because it tied it directly into the district's needs. So I also provided each of the legislators with, or the Joint Finance Committee members with a copy of our public priorities and also the actual speech that I gave.
Because you only had like 90 seconds, right?
For me, it was hard. It was 3, you only get, I know you're going at that. You get 2 minutes, and when I first timed myself with the speech that we wrote up and went over, it was exactly 3 minutes. So I was able to take some things out, but then some of the people were going over by like 15 or 30 seconds, so I was able to get in just about all of it. So, but you do feel rushed because they sit there and they hold it up. I did have an opportunity to also testify at UW Stout last week. My superintendent provided me with release time, so I went on behalf of teachers, but I did mention that you heard from me before as a Greendale School Board member, so I didn't go away. I thought they were pretty receptive. I did have a chance to ask former Senator Luther Olson during an SWSA meeting last week. I asked him if they actually listened during those listening sessions, and because I was just curious because some of them are getting up out of the room and leaving, and it's got to be hard to sit there that amount of time. But he just said that, they have a keen understanding of what districts are asking for. But he didn't make me feel completely confident that they listened that well during that session. So I think it's important probably for the district to follow up with our legislators on what we testified and shared as our needs and asks. And then the Senate Committee on Education, which is chaired by Senator Alberta Darling, held a public hearing last Wednesday. One bill being considered is Senate Bill 182, relating to allowing local school boards to determine the start of fall classes in public schools. WASB does support this, leaving it at the local level. And there were a couple other bills that Senator Bradley, our local representative, introduced, and relating to, one of them was relating to parents for payments for parents on transportation to private schools. So there's several bills out there right now, but those are the.
And you said Senator Darling presented the bill about the start date?
She did, actually.
Okay.
And
interesting, because I think in the past, Senator Olson also represented the Wisconsin Dells area.
Right.
And the conflict between a tourism
right.
area and the education. So I always got the sense that he would not have supported something like that. So it's interesting to see that.
Yeah, and she is new on the committee, but hopefully through listening to districts as far as their needs, they'll let that be a local decision.
Yep,
so,
very good.
But that's what I pretty much have for this time.
All right, thank you for that update. All right, we are at the end of the meeting, and any additional comments from visitors or questions from visitors? Again, I invite you to the podium. If you could state your name and address for the record. Good evening. You're fine. Take your time.
My name is Nancy Farmer, 5551 Grandview Drive in Greendale. I just have a couple of comments. I really wasn't going to prepared to address special education, but since I have a granddaughter who has been in special education program, is now in the middle school, I would like to caution not necessarily the board, but the community about being self-laudatory about 100% graduation rate for the special ed students. I know that her parents have had difficulty getting classroom teachers involved, and the attitude has been somewhat that it falls simply on the special ed teachers to take care of their educational needs. When she has asked for additional work to improve her test levels, it's been met with resistance. So much as I would encourage professional development for the special ed teachers, I would also encourage some kind of special ed background for the individual teachers, the classroom teachers. I spent my last 20 years teaching at UW-Whitewater in the College of Education program, and they were only required as classroom teachers to take one class in Introduction to Special Ed. So I think the fact that there's a lack of preparation maybe at that level, there needs to be more, especially as the district numbers increase. My other comments have to deal with the idea of the equity. I'd like to see if I can find my little... I was reading this statement about the first 100 days of the equity programs, and one of the comments or sentences in there addressed the idea that we're trying to reduce hundreds of years of lack of equity in Greendale as a community, and I'm just wondering what that was based on. Is that based on any kind of research, or is that anecdotal, or where did that comment come from, that the district's policy is to address hundreds of years of lack of equity?
I can follow up with you.
You would, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, if you leave your name with Marianne, I will follow up with you on that, the history of where some of those are coming from.
Okay, and then what percentage of the programs, the educational programs, or the throughout the day, the course of the day in classrooms is going to be devoted to equity?
I can follow up with you on that.
Okay. My concern is I also spent 10 years as director of a community center that was 75% minority programs in population. I am concerned that when we start to get where we talk about equity and we set out specifically racism, that students are not going to end up being victims or perceived as victims by other students in the community. That is a concern that I have, and I think there's a lot of hyperbole out and about what this was going on in our country right now. And I am concerned about that because I know that as an educator or teacher at UW-Whitewater, I had students who were in my class who were not prepared to be in college. And it was a kind program. It was a program to meet them where they're at. But we're giving these students and people a false hope that they have the ability to do things that at this particular point in time without extra support they do not have. So I would just caution as a parent, former parent of students, as a grandparent, and as an educator, that we don't fall into that hyperbole that we treat people differently in a way to kind of make up for their past problems that have occurred by treating them and identifying them as victims, or because the perception is then they're less than others, and that's not equity at all.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
comments. And as Ms. Midzik said, if we can get your contact information, I think it's a great opportunity for you to have a conversation with our superintendent so that she can give you some background about what the intent and the expectation of some of that work is. So thank you for sharing your
Very
feedback.
much. Appreciate it.
All right, any other comments this evening? Okay, then we are adjourned, and as I mentioned, because we are meeting on the fourth Monday this month, our next board meeting is Monday, May 3rd at 7.